What's up, guys? I'm here with Doug Harp, ex-CEO of Weston Engineering for over 20 years. And you just had a company with Candy Controls, and I'm just very fascinated and first of all, thankful that you reached out to me to be on the podcast. And I know you have a wealth of industry experience with, not only the system integration and controls background, but also IIoT and the Internet of Things. So, Doug, I'm going to pass the mic to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. It's great seeing you. I think we go back to when you were programming PLCs in diapers, maybe. It's great to be here back in Folsom, California, my home base, and back talking to people in the automation world. So look forward to telling you about my journey today.
So your journey today started in the San Francisco Bay Area, so that's where you're from. And you also stopped by the ICC and popped your head in there and said hello. So why don't you tell us about the journey today, but also not only that, just the journey in general to where you got to here today, talking to me on the Zack Scriven podcast.
Absolutely, Zach. So I'll tell you about my latest journey. We'll go back to my historical journey in the days of automation, which really kind of put me in a position to go out and at the age of 50 and become a startup guy and start working in the Silicon Valley and building the new software for the industrial internet. And that was really my passion, and had spent 20-something years doing it with industrial automation, grew up around a lot of those systems, and now we're seeing the industrial world now starting being transformed by the internet technology. And so one of the more interesting things is we actually sold our company in April, and I helped integrate it into the acquirer, Altair Engineering. Our company was Candy Controls. So what we did was we built a product that did a lot of the basic things we used to do in controls, which was convert protocols and discover information and get data and connect to things. Except in this little $400 or $500 gateway, we had 8 or 9 protocols. We could automatically discover data and devices, remotely provision them from the cloud, and be connected and have data streaming to the cloud and to APIs within minutes. And I remember the days when every point cost tens and hundreds and thousands of dollars of system integration time to get devices and data flowing through control systems. So it's really cool. We also built it with a internet approach, very agile team, very fast. We would release our software and update our gateways about every 30 to 60 days. So think of your TiVo box at home. We now had TiVo in the factory floor. So we were updating security, OS, software configuration all over the air through secure connectivity, which really transforms the way things are done. Almost like the cloud has transformed the last 10 years, business models and technology models. We're now seeing that computing infrastructure will be moved to the edge over the next 5 to 10 years. So it provides a lot of opportunity for new innovators to come to market with new types of solutions and really start solving some of the more difficult problems around predictive maintenance and managing outage and operational insights and operational optimization that we tried so hard with our historical logic-based control systems.
Awesome, man. Let me just say that's you are the ideal guest for the podcast because my background in integration, it was kind of hard to move the industry when I was so stuck in the ruts and the trenches of it. And seeing guys like you being able to have this platform to tell your story is helping move the industry forward more. And, let me just say that even being 50, you said, in that older generation, that you're still proving that you can still innovate and move forward. And, that was always my biggest complaint is that the system integration world was so slow to change. And so, yeah, man, thank you. Thank you for helping, me in the cause. So, you were saying that, Candy kind of started out in a little bit of the residential, power demand response. Then you guys kind of migrated into the building automation, kind of in the smaller industrial warehousing space, 100,000 square feet. You want to talk a little bit more about that or whatever you want to talk about too, man? The mic is yours.
Yeah, so Candy's focus originally, which I was not a founder of Candy, it was around since about 2009. So it was a very early, one of the earliest IoT platforms. So they pushed to market in really demand response and controlling things in homes. Now we call them smart homes. But shedding load, so turn off somebody's hot water heater or increase or decrease the set point on a thermostat so that the utility could shed load when they had high demand response periods. The company went to market, got into about 5,000 installs. The challenge was utilities are pretty slow in scaling things up, and as a startup, you always have the pressure of get to market and prove that you can scale up. So about 3.5 years ago, they decided to pivot to commercial industrial things in buildings like HVAC and assets and monitoring things in buildings, comfort, lighting, and other type of sensorization, and be able to build a gateway that would go into a building and quickly connect all that data and all those new types of sensors, these wireless sensors, Zigbee, Z-Wave, all these new protocols were coming around, and get that data to the cloud quickly so analytics providers then could provide services to their customers, so app developers. So the concept really around these platforms is starting to create this marketplace. So if you think of Apple and iOS and Android, we have these big marketplaces of app developers. People can build an app and create some business off it, release it and get it to market quickly. Well, that's because that infrastructure exists. Not everybody builds the Apple and iOS and Android infrastructure. So our concept was really be that infrastructure to allow app developers in the marketplace to start developing. So we picked smart buildings because smart buildings and smart homes were somewhat ahead of everybody else when it came to using smart connected devices, much quicker than factories and that. So that was a good opportunity to prove our technology out. Our plan was always to move it over to industrial. But as you know, the industrial world, whether it's in utilities or manufacturing, processing, it's harder to change. They can't afford disruption. Outage means something, can cost millions of dollars. Outage can also there's safety hazards, and so there's a lot of other issues. It's not just opening your garage door or your thermostat or something at your house, right? So, and industrial tends to have much longer life assets, sometimes lasting 30, 40, 50 years. So we can't just go replace all those. So I think the IoT has been a little slower to adopt there, but we're seeing in the Silicon Valley, we're seeing a lot of money being pushed behind it, which usually means a lot of investment money. So we're seeing the first wave of the platforms really get to market, start making traction. I think next 5 to 10 years will be total computing transformation in the factory and in the industrial world.
Yeah, I was at Aviva World Conference last week, and the keynote speaker was some really smart guy from MIT, and he was talking about the power of platforms and changing from there's a triple transformation, like from people making decisions to machines making decisions, and I forget the other two, but man, it's like you said. Once the platforms exist, now you can get to market a lot faster. You can innovate a lot faster. Like I don't need to develop my own web video hosting server because YouTube is already there for me to just upload and start creating videos or podcasts. And so you were saying something earlier interesting that before we started, that from PLCs, it was kind of like a logic-based control, and we're transitioning into like data-driven control and data-driven. So, where do you, now that we got a good background of Candy, where do you see things heading next? Maybe personally, what's your next venture going into?
Well, that's a great question. We'll get back to my next venture in a few minutes, but yeah, I really see the data side of things driving everything right now. When you think about the new types of technologies that really cloud computing has afforded us, things like machine learning and streaming data, event processing, complex event processing, looking at patterns very quickly and coming to conclusions based on data sets versus logic. So you grew up in the PLC world and everything was logic. There was some advanced algorithms, advanced control, but mostly the early days, we went from ladder logic to PLC logic to more complex loop control and that type of stuff. But it wasn't we weren't ingesting a lot of data, and computers really were not, and software was not at a point where it could learn quickly in a commercialized fashion. Today it's commercialized. You can go to Google and get TensorFlow. They're open sourced, right? So a lot of this stuff is available. Now it is really figuring out how do you take that data and solve real problems and start somewhat consumerizing solutions. So in the consumer world, we buy a thermostat and we can put it on the wall ourselves, or somebody can, and we can use it, and it's simple. In the industrial world, even with IoT, it's still pretty complex. So the real driver now is towards simplification. So high-powered data analytics, and then simplify the user experience and get it right to the real user. So we've felt this, right now you could go online and you could go to Airbnb, or you can go to Uber and you could simply get a room, or you can get a ride somewhere. You wouldn't even imagine that 10 years ago, right? So if you think about that, that's the maintenance worker walking the factory floor, or the supervisor walking the factory floor, or the operator of the future is going to have that app feeding them the information that they need, whether it's some kind of outage or it's predicting outage. So the value of data with machine learning is now we can start predicting what's going to happen in the future. Whether it's 10 minutes, 10 hours, 10 days, 10 months. We're always trying to look at things like failure modes and remaining useful life of things, so that we can predict when something might fail so that we can take care of it before it either causes an outage or causes significant damage. So those are the things that drive me. I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm not even a software guy, so I'm a technologist. And so I understand how technology and mechanical things work together. And so you ask me, what am I going to do next? That's really what I'm going to do next, is something around that. I don't know what it is exactly. I'm out exploring it now with people, excited about it. I think one of the interesting things I learned in running a startup was the culture and the thinking is really a lot different. So I came out of mechanical engineering school, went into control systems, so I went from mechanical to logic, so the world obviously was an exact science, right? Well, the world is nowhere close to an exact science, as we know. So what I really learned over the last 4 or 5 years is how to work with people and lead teams, flatten organizations, and create innovative thinking environments so that people can solve problems. And we had a lab at Candy, and we would build software and we break it and build it and break it, and that's what we did all day long. It was like an adult's Toys R Us. We had hundreds of devices all over our office, and we had a small team. A kid in a candy store, exactly. And we took those problems and that our customers would ask us for, and we would jam on them. And sometimes it took us 3 weeks, sometimes 3 months, sometimes a year to solve some of these problems. But we did it fast. Every 2 weeks we were solving new problems, iterating out new solutions, new logic, or new functions. So that's really what I'm doing now. I think there's just a lot of interesting technologies that are starting to come on, and it's going to be a convergence. All this legacy technology isn't really going away. It may transform in the way it's architected. Some people may get disrupted, but I think it's really going to be a growth of the market more than the automation market's going to be displaced. Automation market should grow. IoT should grow enormously. So it's really not a displacement of it. It's a major expansion of how much data and how many sensors we're going to have out in the world on machines monitoring things. Thousands and thousands of times what we have today. So I think that's really where I see the opportunity, and it's kind of I say the industrial the industrial internet is the old guy's internet. So even people who've been around for 20, 30 years know the domain. As long as they keep themselves modernized in their thinking and their business models, their background and their technology background mixed with all these smart programmers coming out in the world who can build stuff amazingly, you mix those two things together, and I think that's what we're going to see and we're already seeing it. We're seeing companies like Siemens and GE really putting money behind it, and we're seeing companies like Rockwell invest in companies like PTC, and an insurance company, Munich Re, buying Relayer for $300 million last week. Those are the types of things that are starting to happen, and these are real industrial solutions.
One of the companies that comes to mind is Seek Software, and they're one of the sponsors, not of this podcast, but of the ICC conference. I'd love it if they sponsored the podcast. But what do you know about them, and what is it they're doing? I know it's a little bit of predictive analytics and things like that. So do you know anything about that platform that you're talking about?
Yeah, I know a little bit. I've just started getting introduced to them. So they are a nicely funded startup who is really driving machine learning for the industrial world. Easy integration of data in the cloud, machine learning, solving real problems. So I think those are the types of companies and technology. So if you think of how the consumer internet and the cloud world evolved, it didn't start with 5 companies all became the 5 major companies. It started with hundreds of companies, and many of them got aggregated, some of them got washed out, some of them rose up and became major players. But for the most part, we're kind of going through that same thing right now. We have a lot of technology development going on right now that is starting to get aggregated, has been going on for about 5 years, I would say, a little more, and it's starting now to get aggregated. And so we're starting to see more aggregation, and then we're seeing companies who their primary intent is build technology quickly and sell it to somebody who needs that piece of technology, because it is a very complex puzzle when you start looking. There's no single platform, or there's no single analytics tools that are going to solve everybody's problems. And I think in industrial, we're going to see a broader base of major players than we have in maybe the consumer side, where companies like Facebook can just dominate. Industrial buys a little different, but I think we will see that type of scale up that I don't think we've ever seen in the industrial world. So as solutions get out there that really solve problems, everybody will buy them, just like we all buy the same types of apps and use the same types of platforms, right, that make these other companies really be able to scale. And these companies are built to scale. Most of the legacy company software and companies were not built to scale. So if they needed 100 million users, it would implode them. They'd need a system integrator to go into every project. They'd never get it done, right? So the new models make it simple and scalable. Got to be highly scalable. Also needs to be able to be managed remotely. So you need manageability so that you can maintain software versions and you can maintain OSs and security across the platform. So what else? What are you seeing out there in IoT? Are you seeing the automation world adopting it? Do you see it changing a lot? I know you're talking to a lot of people. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I see. First of all, I'd love to see someone use Google TensorFlow on an industrial project. And if someone's already done it, reach out to me, because I think that'd be really cool to see, that those domains kind of cross over. But my first client and brand sponsor that I do digital marketing for, Intellic Integration, they're a small system integrator, but they're really kind of like the future of system integration. I've kind of long said that system integration, and you just reinforced that concept, that it's kind of like a dying field. Not dying, but it needs to change with the technology. Like you said, if you needed an app or a legacy software, like let's say, I don't want to name anything, but you wanted to scale that to 100 million users, you would need so many system integrators that would just never work. The future is having these systems that kind of self-deploy, easy to scale. One of those technologies that Intellic uses and Walker is a big proponent of using is MQTT, where report by exception, sending the data from the edge up into the central system, and that automatically generates the tag structure, automatically generates your screens. So there's no real configuration like on a traditional SCADA. You'd have to go into the development software, add the screen, add the tags, enter in the address. Just kind of like tedious stuff, and we were lucky to have it at that time, but now, things are changing. So, yeah, I mean, another company that I just recently started working with is Flow Software. They're a data hub for different databases. So they connect to Ignition, Wonderware Historian, SQL databases, and they summarize that data into time buckets and aggregate it. So you can have, different plants from different data like sources with different frequencies aggregated into time buckets of like whatever you define, 1 minute, 5 minute, 1 hour, to then do quick reporting and analysis on. So like a manufacturer who wants to, see like what the last 8 hours of their production was, they don't want to pull back 80,000 data points, This is quickly gives them the information that they need to make the decision. And while that part may not be sound like super innovative itself, like what's cool is they integrate with like Slack channels and social media. So these reports and alerts can be sent out through social channels, like cell phone and emails kind of dying. So it's kind of an interesting product. They are also a sponsor at the ICC. So I know that wasn't really an answer to your question, but I wanted to talk about it because I'm really seeing what really stands out to me is, just as much as I believe in a technology or a company, them believing in me as far as what it is that I'm trying to do and be forward thinking and not just the digital transformation, but the marketing and communication transformation. That's why it's kind of a two-way street, So, what was the original, what did you ask me? Just I'll pass it back.
So I think one of the other aspects of IoT that I think gets lost in the technology world is IoT is really about business transformation, less about digital transformation. So business models change when we make products smart and connected. So when we have autonomous vehicles, you don't have to drive a vehicle, so you don't need a garage. So your car parks somewhere and it comes and picks you up in the morning. So these are real, true transformational things that are happening, and they're going to happen in our factories because that's where these things are built. And most manufacturing OEMs want new business models because they've tended to design a product, build a product, and sell it, and then they lost track of it. They didn't necessarily know who bought all their products, but they got warranty calls and problem calls and recalls and all this stuff so what they want to be able to do now is either monitor that, provide services around it, move toward as a service types of business models. So we're all used to apps and all this that we pay for at, some kind of software as a service. Well, we're starting to see pumping or water as a service or whatever, energy as a service. So we're going to see more and more as a service model where instead of buying my product, you buy my service for 10 years and it comes with a pump. And so making that technology embedded right on the machine at manufacturing is really what kind of the next wave we're going to see in business model transformation, which is really how do you monetize things.
Yeah.
So, companies like automotive companies or jet engine companies, have new models that they're developing. So I think that's what we're going to see push things the hardest, because there's we've somewhat started getting used to being able to lease anything, right?
Yeah.
And instead of buying something, I think you're just going to pay for usage. You already, a lot of things in our lives, our cable, our electricity, our water, or whatever, we pay based on certain types of usage models, right? Yeah. So I think we're going to see more and more of that push into the marketplace as products move from kind of dumb to connected to smart and eventually to autonomous. And so if you think of the IoT from the stuff we came out of, like automation, automation was all about monitoring and controlling things, factories, grids, buildings, whatever, equipment, assets, right?
Yeah.
IoT covers that, so we call that the operations domain. And the product domain of IoT is embedding technologies, sensorizing, and embedding technologies like MQTT and agents so that when a product gets installed, it automatically connects to its cloud and connects to its service and is automatically provisioned. So that's where you get back to where's the system integration in that? It's at a different place.
Yeah.
It's in taking the data and figuring out how to apply different types of algorithms. And there is humans a lot in data sciences still.
Yeah.
It's taking that data and trying to solve problems with it. So it's not how do I connect my pump to the cloud.
Yeah.
And you and I used to have businesses that we worked in.
Yeah.
That's what we did was we made all that connectivity and we put all those data points in and made it all work. And it was a miracle that it worked sometimes 20 years ago. And then by the time we made it work, everybody was happy.
Don't touch it.
Now, it's going to come out of the box connected, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so, 10 or 20 years from now, everything's going to come connected and smart. And so, you're right, the system integration world is going to change. And just like the IoT world's going to just grow by leaps and bounds, how much data and sensors there are in the world, so is the system integration world going to grow, but it may not be the same system integration world that we know today. And so that, I think that is one of the other things as I kind of came out of Candy and started exploring around. It is interesting to see that a lot of the control system integration is still, while maybe more advanced and streamlined, it's not transformed. And so I think there is a lot of system integrators out there trying to discover what are they going to be in 10 years, right? And newer ones maybe looking at how can they take advantage of being able to do IT and operational technology together and deploy these solutions end to end. So I think great opportunity for kind of the operational technology world to take its big step into the internet. So it's pretty cool.
So Doug, what drives you, man? Like, let's just talk about something a little bit different. What are your passions? If you say data and integration, that's cool too, but yeah, what are some of your other passions and stuff like that?
Yeah, my passions are mostly, my work is a big passion of mine, obviously, as you can tell, because it is what I love doing. But I have a great family, so I spend a lot of time with them, and enjoy skiing, golfing, the outdoors. So I used to travel a lot when I was a consultant. I used to love traveling, and now it's like I haven't traveled for 3 years, and I haven't missed it a bit. So my latest things, I love to fish, love to get out on the ocean, go up to Alaska and fish. I've been doing that for many years. Go out to catch the big one, with grandkids and everything. It's always life is always a handful of things to take care of. So, So I guess one of my true passions these days is kind of transforming the IoT and starting these businesses and running them. It's like it feels like I'm 20-something again. So it is it's an awesome balance, but it's a lot of fun. And I'm a Raiders fan, and I'll admit it on a podcast, even these days. So I love sports also, participating in them and watching them. So I grew up Bay Area fans mostly, in Kings, our Sacramento team, of course. Into basketball and football. And what else am I doing these days? I think right now it's all about exploring my next thing. That's what really is energizing me right now. And it's been fun. I've had about a month now to go out and explore. And I've met some really awesome people, unbelievably smart, and just I find that in the new technology, people's ability to be inquisitive about solving problems that they don't even know exist.
Yeah.
It's, one of the things I've really learned is kind of this thinking that it's not about solving the problem, it's about finding the problem. And I see that in a lot of these very leading tech folks who are leading these startups, that mental thinking of you're not really trying to solve that problem, you're trying to find the problem and solve it, and find the problem and solve it, and find the problem and solve it. And they're just openly inquisitive, and everything is open, free, everything on the table. It's not a hierarchical, finger pointing type of culture that kind of historically some of us grew up in. It's just this ongoing need to find new ways to solve problems, and then finding new problems to solve. And it's very refreshing. We've seen it, I think, like I said, in the big internet, but now to watch the same types of people come into the industrial world and be interested in more industrial things, environment, energy, quality of life things that really, I think, transform the world much more than social media and some of these other things that in their own way have helped us transform and democratize things. But if we can democratize things like environmental management and energy and things that impact our kids and grandkids' lives, I think it is a much more satisfying area to spend your time in.
So I got one question for you, and then I have a final question that I sometimes ask in closing. Any advice you would have back to if your 20-year-old self is listening to this podcast? What advice would you have for him, and where do you see yourself and the world in 20 years?
So if I'm talking to a 20-year-old, I think it's follow your passions, do what's in your heart. It's easy to try and follow what has happened in the past and try to repeat it, or be a tech guy because everybody's a tech guy. But really do what's in your heart. Follow your heart. Money will follow. Be passionate about what you do, because that's what makes you do whatever you do great. And it doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's a good contributor to society and to humanity. But really follow your heart. Where do I see things? I'm sure not nearly as transformed as all the prognosticators say, but I think we will see a lot of fundamental changes in kind of the way we live our lives in 20 years. It's going to be interesting, because developing countries and developing areas of the world will be able to leverage it because they don't have things, so they'll just build with new technologies and new ways, because these things are really transforming everything. How you build a house with a 3D printer, right? We're seeing people build 900 square foot houses in third world countries with a 3D printer. Well, so that's changing a lot about the way things and the way people live. And so I think that's going to be the biggest transformation we'll see. Hopefully we'll have peace on Earth in 20 years, but I don't know how I can solve that problem. So I'll do my part, but I really look forward to maybe looking back in 20 years and saying I made a mark on the world.
Prognosticators, to predict according to present indications or signs foretell. You learn something new every day, and lately I've been saying that multiple times per day. Doug, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.